Now start screen share. Let me just double check that it's recording. It's calling progress. Yes, it's recording. So the topics of today's meeting is twofold. I was asked by Olga to how we could actually add new records in the project entity. And as everyone knows, a project consists of many different underlying database tables. And I established some functionality for this to be used by unit tests in both Angular and in type C#. So what I have, which you can take a look at, and it's a good starting point for you, Olga, is this function. It's called create tests. Actually, let me change this to test. And what it does is that it has an input, which is a dictionary. And the first element in the dictionary is the entity that you want to create elements for. So in this case, I'm wanting to create 3 activities for this new project. And I'm looping through the dictionary. And then you can see I extract the entity and the number of records I want to generate. And then I have this generalized function I put in to product dynamic contract, which is function which currently supports these type of entities. So one is resource, which you wanted to add resources, right, Olga?
Yes, in current moment I'm facing with resources, but actually I think it will be more.
Yeah. So this can be extended on to cover any types of entities that have been associated with the project. But let's just trace the data flow for now adding resource data to the project. So I have established this function. The input here is the project contract itself, and then the number of records you want to add for this resource type. And you can see here, I create an array size to the number of elements I want created. And then I loop through and add individual elements here, making sure that I use the project ID, which is passed through the contract. I'm also invoking on this function called generate key values. And this is overridden in the resource dynamic contract. And you will see this is a very simple case, which are using negative unique values. But of course, these should not be saved into the database. You should actually pay attention to the resource UID and generate resource UIDs based on what is to be expected values in the database. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think should happen is that to generate ID, sorry, let me go back to the add. So when you generate the ID, it should be the next key value should be the number of elements that are already existing on project as. So for instance, the first time you generate a key value, you will be adding using the key value of 1. The second time you add the next record, you will be using a value of 2, right? Because there's already one record in place. You can also use, I guess, max previously IDs plus 1, but kind of that is the pattern I think we should follow. At least that is how I apply the proper key generation value in web client.
So it means that my code should handle, let's say, key generation, yeah? If,
Yes.
for example, so as I understand, the project contains a collection of resources that are allocated, and the key value will be applied on, let's say, my part of code, not on the database level.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the last step then, when we have generated an array of these elements, is to assign this array as the new list of resources to the project, and you just assign it to the resources like this. Now this has now become part of the data model, but as such, it hasn't been flagged to be saved to the database yet, because I'm basically generating new elements, but I haven't assigned any values to them. So maybe the next step then would be for you to make sure that when the dynamic or when the project dynamic contract should be saved to database, it's saved using the proper flags. So what you want to make sure then is you can use this PC set row value. Set value. Let us check. Might be I need to double check some implementation I made in activity. So I have activity change worker, and I have an update row, and I have something called pass value to existing data contract, and I'm using the context set value, and the context here is a build context. Okay, understand. So let's go back. So I need to access the project's context, and there's another thing I want to check. How to get access to the build context. So let's find this. So we have something called users build contexts, and that's used part of the activity. So that's the local context, which is used when you communicate the individual changes from the web client to the server, but it doesn't contain the entire set of changes. Let me just quickly find where we have access. We have something called save activity changes, and that would be accessing the global scope. So I want to get access to the context. Let's see how it actually accessed. Changed fields.
Do you have API for saving, let's say, collections one by one, or some generalized save functionality for the project?
We have a generalized save functionality for the project, and for that to work, you need to make sure that the elements that you are changing are flagged properly. So what I have on the project dynamic contract is a generation tracker, and this is an array which includes a listing of all elements that are supposed to be saved to the database.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an activity change, it could be a resource change, etc., etc. I want to just make sure that I can point you in the right direction to where you would be using this. So I have an API for it, which I'm trying to trace down, which should simplify the use, because creating an element on this generation tracker is making use of cell identity and generation identity, which are kind of advanced topics. So let's try to find this. Mark assignment first changed. Maybe let me just borrow this functionality that we have here in a code change that I'm making. So let's borrow this and go back to my original scope. Let's see, we're here. So now I want to make sure that if I want to say that for R0, I want to set one of the properties of the resource. Let's do text1 equal to resource1. So now the new row is given its text1 value, but it's still not being flagged on the project to be saved. So that is the important point here in distinction. So let me just add missing references. So key values is R0. I think I should spend some time and make this API a bit simpler, because there's lots of different elements to it. But at least this is a starting point, and we can, of course, simplify it together later on.
Yeah, can you send me this part of code, like an example, to the Teams chat?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I need to make sure that it's text1. That's not flagging. So this should work now. And it should even compile. So I will submit this as a change to develop. I don't think it's a problem to have that as a change. So you can see here, I'm now doing the following, just to recap. I have a project contract which is currently empty of resources. I'm creating a number of resources, making sure that I properly generate IDs for them, so that you want to override. Then I assign all of new resources to the project. Just as a sample, I'm setting text1 as a new value, and I want to make sure that this value is saved to database. So I need to tag it in the project contracts generation tracker as a value to be saved. There is one more addition I need to make sure, and this is still somewhat manual. I'm double checking now. This might be working without this, but I want to make sure that it is explicitly set down and you understand what this is. It is. So when you are saving new records into the database, it needs to be tagged to be created, because there are some, you can be tagging existing row to be deleted as part of the next save, or you could be tagging an existing record to be updated as part of next save. But now we want to make sure that this new element has been tagged to be created in the database, and that is using the QRD states. So I'm also now making sure that this is set and also passed to the database. So that should work. So you need to do this for all the properties you are wanting to write into the database. And additionally, you need to make sure that this is done. Again, it might very well be that this is not necessary. I don't actually haven't checked that fully, but for now, just add this secondary logic to all the assignments that you do. So this is repeated in many lines. You change the text 1 to 10, and then you do this one only once. So again, the reason behind this is that you should be able to flag data to be created, updated, or deleted against the database records. Hopefully that is quite understood.
Okay.
Did you have any questions regarding this rundown?
Well, I have only one question more. If I perform such operations, for example, not only for resources, but maybe for assignments and other stuff, if I will call, let's say, some general save for the project model, it should work in the current moment, yeah?
Yes, in fact, if you look to the save implementation, this is the invocation to trigger the save, and you can see the input is only who's doing the save and what project to save. And the project then is found in the server-side cache. And you can see there's no indication here to what should be saved. That is already flagged by generation tracker.
Okay. I hope I will understand how to call it. But anyway, I will call you if I will misunderstand
Yes,
something.
if you are unsure on how to reproduce and follow this pattern, let me know and we can go through some code on your side, perhaps.
No, this part is quite understandable for me. Just need some example and that's it.
Yeah. What I'll do then before. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, maybe I will have some questions during my implementation. Isn't it so that all the calculations inside this model I should perform on my side? I mean, during the importing data.
So if you are doing specific calculations against the activity, sorry, the assignment level, then you need to do that directly on assignment level. Currently, we don't have any logic on assignment level other than roll up to activity level. But if you are worried about needing to update activities after having made assignment changes, there's no need to worry for that. If you make sure that as part of your business logic, you also invoke on the project build pipe. So let's return to that topic once you have everything in play, and I can show you how you would want to make sure that you keep the project consistent in that after you're making resource and assignment changes, you know how to trigger the global calculations that needs to be run before saving to database.
Okay, yeah, I think it will be nice.
I just want to make sure that I now save these changes I made during our session. So let me do that. And let me do like, so well, let me also, I don't think it should be a problem to compile this, so let me just push this. If compilation is broken, I will fix it after we have this meeting. So the second part that we wanted to discuss today was a request from Anatoly. And Anatoly was curious to see if he needed to do something on his side to be able to submit user input from the web client related to escalated rates into the server-side cache. So I wanted now to show you some code for this. So this was the starting point for the first element, and this is the second element. So you already know quite a bit about the generalized data model, what I'm calling the unified data model, and you also know about the unified field model. And I also shortly described the business model, but what I didn't actually pay much attention to so far is the data flow. I mean, data needs to flow from the database to the web server, and from the web server to the web client, and in the opposite direction. Now, let's not go into details about the SQL element. For now, I think we can delay that, given that I have established the API that you can always use now. I don't think there's many cases where you need to extend on it or something like that. So, but yeah, as long as you follow the tagging, flagging of values to be saved, like I just displayed, the database update should handle itself, basically. But when you want to communicate data from the web server to the web client and the other direction, what is very central here is this serialization helper that I created. So the role of this serialization helper class is to take the entire project data model and make it such that it's transmittable using JSON formatted data and submitted to the web client. I have similar logic on the web client to unpack or deserialize it. But let's just take a quick look at the quick overview of how this helper class or serializer class is working. You would see that it has a separate element for the different entities. So again, this is such a regular pattern that I'm thinking to make it a single implementation. But so for now, I didn't want to add too much complexity to it. It's even somewhat complex. So for now, just know that, for instance, when I worked on adding support for escalated rates, then I added an element here to this serialization contract. If you look to the deserialization method, assuming now we have received or we have managed to serialize the data on the web server side, we are now receiving the data on the server side. And I want to describe loosely or quickly the logic that it goes through. So data flow is through this one single point. And first I deserialize the project entity data. So that's the project name, project UID, etc. But let's take a look at rate, how that is actually handled. So first, I'm creating here a dictionary based on entity, and it points to the serialization element you can see here. And then I loop through all of these dictionary elements, and I check here if there are any elements to be serialized, sorry, deserialized. And if there are, I loop through the project area, because you could submit changes from the web client to not only one project, but to several projects at the same time, if you like. So I identify now the deserialized records, which are matching the project UID. If there's no match against the UID, I don't do anything. But then if there is a match, you would see that the selected here is of the generalized type. You know, the data contracts are a part of data model, which consists of 3 different levels. The first level is the dictionary itself. On C#, it's a concurrent dictionary. On the second level, we have this utility class called entity dynamic row. And then on the third level, we have the dynamic contracts. So it's very important that you can see that the transmitted data is on this mid level. It's not a full contract entity yet. So I'm calling on this function who returns the constructed contract based on the mid-level data. So just note that you can invoke on this, and it has some support. I haven't added all the entities in our data set. I'm only extending on this as needed. But just know that it's supporting now rate Anatoly. I just added this today. I found it missing. Once the data has been deserialized and now mapped to its proper dynamic contract, it's put into this dictionary. And you can see the dictionary is referencing the entity. And then it's invoking on this. So if I go to this, if I go to the rate implementation, sorry, it was not my intent to go there. Rates. There we go. So we have this property called the rates on project dynamic contract, which returns an array of dynamic or escalated rates. And you can see itself is not hosting the value, but it's stored in this dictionary. So this is working for all entities. So I think the complexity in the API I established is that I can't or don't want to reference the entities explicitly in too many places, because that makes the need to do copy paste between different entity types. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm referencing the entity as a parameter, right? Always do this as a parameter instead of having it as an explicit. So I don't want to like create the same data flow for rate and then duplicate that in copy paste and you do the same for resource in a link, etc. So basically, I'm collapsing the solution into a single solution, which makes sure that this data flow is working. So this function, which consists of like 20 lines, contains the entire logic for deserialization and putting those changes into the project model. You follow so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one more addition to this. Is that you see here, this project is actually created by all the data that it receives. So just know that this project is not the same as the project stored in the server-side cache. This is a temporary project, which is a recipient of all the data that has been passed to the server side. Because you want to do incremental changes. So when I add the project in activities and I make a change on this level, let's change the name. Then this is now transmitted as a new project. So now I just received this as a project here, but you can see here, this project that you are receiving here is only containing a single activity row. But the server-side cache contains many rows, right? But you can see here I'm actually giving this project a single activity row. So there's also a function behind the scene here, which takes this newly created project and merges it into the more like global project cache. So it makes sure that you don't actually delete the rows that have not been passed from the server side, from the web client to the server. So there's a logic to merge a small subset of a project like this into the larger project. But I don't think I want to go into that detail, but just know that this is implemented to support all entity types. So not only do I have a generalized framework for receiving data from different entities, but I've also implemented a support for merging these smaller data sets into the larger one. I think that's how far I would like to take
Claire,
it today.
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
Isn't it so that in this case, I don't need, let's say, be worried about, just explain. For example, I have a collection of resources at my project, and then I want to update some of them. Maybe one of them will be added, like a new one, and maybe some of them will be just updated. Should I worry somehow about these new items, or I just need to say to the project model that I want, for example, to add new ones, and then it will decide by itself, should it update or should it, I don't know, add?
Yes. So you have this option to make use of this extra functionality. So far, what I described for you today in this solution that we found here, when you create a test project and you create new contracts, my assumption here was that you were actually given a reference to the project cache. But if you like, you can hide some of the complexity and create your own project from scratch with the same project ID, and then this will be like a small subset of the entire project. Then you can actually make use of this merge functionality. So if you have added in your small project a new record, it will be flagged to be it will be added to the global model, and it will also be at the same time flagged to be created as a new element in the database. So this extra step that we saw, I added to with CRUD status, that you wouldn't have to worry about, because the merge algorithm is such that if it detects that you have been referencing a UID value that has not been seen before, it will actually flag it to be created as a new element in the database and set the proper database status flag.
In that case, it means that I need to, let's say, load project to the server cache, and then I'll create, let's say, a small subset of this project with my own data. And how should I say to the, let's say, a server cache project that this one is just should be saved like updated data for this original one?
So we have this now, for now, private static function, which you can invoke. It will need to be given the project UID, and then it will project. Let's return to this. I haven't actually thought about reusing this outside of this place. So maybe better take a look at that and come back to you, because I think I need to reinvestigate my solution on this.
Okay, because it actually can be a good hint.
Yeah. So I have these functions. Again, I think I need just to make sure that I know my around the code here. I wasn't prepared for this. So I think we have at least the initial tasks to go through, like how to create a new record in the project model, and then later on we can talk about if you want to do that directly on the project cache, or if you want to do it using this merge functionality later on. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Any other questions or comments? No, did you get your answer, Anatoly, about if it was supported in a general framework, and it is? So do you know how to do it from the client side, Anatoly?
I don't understand if current solution support collected rate. Can we go step by step on the function called
Yes. So
activity changes?
Yes, let's do that. So, but I think we'll do it on TypeScript side, right? You wanted to do it on the web client? Is that correct?
I need web client. I just I need to go step by step on the server side now.
Oh, okay, you have done the web client. You have been able to pass it through the activity changed method.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In that case, let's go through the activity change then.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go on the top. So this is the main function when you receive incremental changes from the web server, sorry, web client over to the server.
Correct.
And part of this step is loading the project data from database if it's not already loaded. Most likely you would be loading, getting access to the project from the server-side cache.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step, once you have the project at hand, is to take the data you generated on the web client and pass it into the global project. And so this is done here, update cached rows. And if you look to this implementation, you will see that it's generalized already in that the input here is activity change request. And the activity change request contains the changed items. And the changed items could be of the activity entity type. It could be of the escalated rates types. So it doesn't matter here what type it is. As long as you submit one of the known types, it should be able to handle it. And let me just show you how this is accessed. So you can see here, this is another merge functionality, which is outside of the full merge. And you can see here that I'm looping through the step by step because I might be lost myself. So first we get hold of the entity of the changes that are coming from the web client. So basically this would be, in your case, the rate entity, which is representative of escalated rates. And then I wanted to have an array that are going to be the recipient of the merge data set. So it needs to be a list and not an array because you want to be able to add new records to it. So it needs to be a dynamic record. It can't be a fixed sized one. And then I get hold of the existing rate values for the project. You can see here I'm accessing the rate entity and I receive the contracts. So 2 contracts here is then set to be the existing contracts before the merge, right? And then from wrappers are the input values. So now I have access to the existing values and I have access to the new values that are being passed from the web client to the server. And this function here loops through all the new values and updates the make sure that these are put into the project. Now, this function also returned the delete count. You can see here in that some of these records that have been existing could be tagged now to be deleted. So basically, if you on the web client side have tagged a row to be deleted, after having run through this loop, then you can actually examine what elements that have been existing in the web server cache is now been flagged to be deleted. So the deleted count will be greater than 0 in some cases. If there are no data submitted from the web client that forces records to be deleted, it doesn't do anything more. But if the delete count is greater than 0, you need to make certain that you delete the contract from this array, because this array will also be passed to the project. So these lines here updates the server-side cached project, and after if you delete request a delete, then of course the server-side cached project should also not display this record anymore. So the next time you get on the server-side cache, it will not be displaying the deleted record. But you can see here the deleted contract is actually scheduled to be deleted in the database by adding it to this deleted contract. So when you save it, even though it's not part of the data model anymore, it's been stored in an offside place so that it knows to be deleted on save. Okay. Now let's do. Do you want to go through more logic, or do you follow the data flow here now?
Okay, but should I change something, or it should work?
I think you should find it to be working. If not, contact me and I will take a proper look on it. But as before, if you find it not working as I'm now describing it to be working, then I will happily fix it for you.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. So yeah, just to go back to what I just said now, this is a very advanced API, and I know that you're struggling because I haven't written any documentation for it. I was hoping, and I'm hoping that the introduction seminars I've already had for you guys would be like a running starting point for this. But of course, when we need to add currently unsupported data sets, like Anatoly is now doing, or then of course there might be some work involved in extending on the framework. And for now, I think I will reserve that role to myself. And I think you would confirm, Anatoly, that I haven't spent too much time in adding what you needed, and I will continue to support the team this way. But hopefully, and eventually, I do hope everyone will have the same capability to actually do these extensions and modifications that I'm currently doing on your behalf. Any other questions or comments? No, in that case, I wish everyone a good day, and I will be saving this. I'm sure this video will be used later on for you guys. Okay, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Brent. Bye-bye.